Okay, it's go time. This is going to be hard to begin with. You have to get in the groove. You need to solve this equation. 9x to the second power plus 18x equals 0. Solve the equation means find what the variable x is equal to. Now, since the x is to the second power, you have x is 9 times x to the second power plus 18 times x equals 0. Since the x, the highest power it is to a 2, there's 2 answers to the equation. Haven't seen that before. Now, underneath that, here's what you want to write. And I need you to write it. You have x to the second. And you also have the x here that's actually to the first, but it's just x means x to the first. So these two x's cannot be combined. One is to the second power, the other is to just the first power. It's just a plain old x. So what you need to use is a technique, a new technique. It's known as factoring properties, okay? Factoring. Factoring, F-A-C-T-O-R-I-N-G. When you use factoring, first you need to circle the equals, and you need to make sure you have a 0 on one of your sides. You do, that's a 0, so you write the word set. So if you are set at 0, you underline the 2 terms on the other side, the 9x to the second and the 18x. So you're set equal to 0. Then you make this box, and you make a space with a parentheses, and in the space you write the phrase GCF. Now you put the equals 0 outside of your box. That's what you're going to do. Equals 0 is going to go outside of your box. Got that? So that's your setup. Make sure you're set at 0. If you're not, which you're not going to be here, you got a problem, but you're set. Now remember your GCF rules from the assignment from yesterday. You check the final term for a letter, okay? Out over here, you're not checking the 0. You're looking at these. Make your wall on that side. You check the last number and see if there's a letter behind it. There is. There's an X. You need to put that out there. Then you check the first term for a negative. You see if there's a negative in the front, and there's not, so we're not going to be putting a negative. Then you find the GCF of your coefficients, which would be 9 and 18. 9 and 18. So you look at the 9's your small number, so you go to the 9 row, and 18's in that row along with 9. So 9's your greatest common factor. Okay, so you put 9 out there with your x. Now you put that in parentheses, and then under these lines you put 9x, whatever your GCF is. Now you divide. So you're going to divide 9 by 9, that's 1, but then you have to divide the x to the second by the x. Remember how that's done. You write 2 x's because that's x to the second. Then you're going to divide by this single x down there. You cancel, and you still have x, so you put an x alongside the 1. The leftover x goes alongside the 1. Then I take positive 18 divided by 9, okay? And that's positive 2. So since it's positive 2, you need to put a plus sign with 2, and then you divide the x by the x. But since they're both solo x's, they just cancel, okay? Now, what you do is you line that up, okay? Put your 9x with your 1x plus 2. And then you label this F1 and this F2. That's called factor 1 and factor 2. So then you set them each equal to 0. So 9x equals 0 or 1x plus 2 equals 0. Okay, so over here you have this 9x means 9 times x. You just divide by 9, and 0 divided by 9 is 0. That's your first answer. Now in the other one, you got this 1 times x. And then a plus 2 equals 0. So you get rid of your plus 2 with a minus 2. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Then you divide each side by your 1. And then negative 2 divided by 1 is negative 2. So 0 and negative 2 are your answers. Next problem. Negative 24x to the second power equals 9x. X is going to have 2 answers throughout this assignment because it's always to the second power. But unfortunately, you also have an x here that's to the first power. I'm not going to put the first power on it, but it's x second and x. When you have those two things in the equation, you have to apply this factoring. Okay, it's drawing boxes. So, circle your equals, you don't have the 0. Okay, so you take this 9x out of here, you put a 0, and to take that to a 0, you would subtract it, since it's positive. But here's the problem. That was just x. It can't go with the negative 24, because negative 24 has x to the second. See, this 9 I'm taking away has just x. So what you do is you hang it up here. Okay? Hang it up. That's what it's called. So then you put equals 0, and then you make slots. Okay, you didn't have to do this here because you had your 0 right away, but if you don't have the 0, you need to get that to a 0. But if it can't go with any of that stuff over there, then I need to make my slot starting with x to the second, because we have the negative 24. Now, next is your x slot. And then you don't need a slot for your constants because you don't have any constants. You just have the x second with the negative 24 and the x with the negative 9. Okay, so you don't need a constant slot. So I don't make that constant space. Okay, so I put negative 24 in the x to the second slot. And then since I'm minusing 9, that's going to be a negative 9 in the x slot. There is no constant because I don't have it. Okay. So it's just these two terms. So now it's two terms, negative 24 with x to the second, negative 9 with x. Now I do what I did up here. Okay, I make my GCF, and then I'll be able to solve it, hopefully. Okay, so I make the wall there, and you check the last term. You're not worried about the 0. You kick the 0 out. The last term, again, remember how to do this. You check the final term for a variable, and the variable's there. It's x. You check the first term for a negative sign, and it's there. So you put the negative right in front of the space. Now you need to find a number using 24 and 9. Find the GCF of the coefficients. So I go 9, okay? 9 would be first, 24 is not there, so I go up and find 9. Here's 9, is 24 there, 24 is there, so it would be 3. That would be your greatest common factor. Okay, then you put that in parentheses, and under these lines you put negative 3x. Okay, so you're dividing negative 24 by negative 3, that's positive 8. Then you also have to divide the x to the second by the x. I'm showing you how to do that right here. You have x remaining. You put that beside the 8. Then negative 9 divided by negative 3 is positive 3. So since it's positive, I put a plus 3. And then divide the x by the x. Those just cancel. There's no more left. So the 3 does not get an x. Okay? Now you line. Now it's easy. Negative 3x. And then 8x plus 3 equals 0. So F1, F2. So negative 3x equals 0, or 8x plus 3 equals 0. So this means times, so you divide by negative 3. 0 divided by negative 3 is 0. 0 divided by anything is 0. Then over here you got times 8 plus 3. So you got to take out your plus 3. If you have 0 and you subtract a number, it just becomes the negative of that number. Then you divide each side by 8. Negative 3 divided by 8 is negative 0.375. You can reuse that, or you can click second, PRB, second, and then the PRB key and hit equals, and then it'll give you the fraction. You can write the decimal if you want. I don't care. Okay? Okay, next problem. Negative 42x to the second power equals 14x. So, we have two answers, okay, because of the x to the second. So you have x to the second, you've also got an x that isn't to the second, okay? So with those two things in the equation, you need to use your factoring properties. Factors what that says. So first you need a 0 over here. You don't have it, so you take the 14x out by subtracting it. That would be how to take a positive 14x to 0. So we have to subtract 14x somewhere on the other side. It cannot go under the x to the second, so you hang it out. If there was a number there with just x, I would put it below it, but there's not, okay? So, equals 0, and then slot it. So your x to the second is first. Then you have x. You do not have any constants in the equation. 0 does not count. Okay, I just have the negative 42, the negative 14. That's x to the second, that's x. So negative 42 is my x second slot, and then negative 14 is my x slot. When you're minusing, that gets slotted as a negative. Now, you have these two terms. It's known as a binomial. Here, I'll put that off to the side. Two terms. Okay. For now, with two terms, we need the GCF box, and that's going to get us where we need to be. So you check your last term, check the final term for a variable, and it's there. You have x. You check the first term for a negative, it's there. Now, put it at the beginning of the slot, not right up against the x. Now you have to find the GCF of your coefficients, 42 and 14. So 14 is smaller, so I go into the 14th row. 14's there, so is 42, so I would do 14. So then you wrap that up, and then you divide by what you put here, both of them. Negative 14x, and then the same thing here. Negative 42 divided by negative 14 is positive 3. You're dividing. And then x to the second divided by x. You end up with x left over, so you put that beside your 3. Then I take negative 14 divided by negative 14. That's positive 1. So it's positive. You write a plus sign with 1. And then x divided by x cancels. Okay? So now you factored it. So you have your negative 14x followed by your 3x plus 1. Okay? Then f1, f2. So, negative 14x equals 0, or 3x plus 1 equals 0. So you have multiplication by negative 14. You just need to divide, and that's 0. Over here you have multiplication by 3 and plus 1. You take out your plus 1 by minus 1. 0 minus 1 takes you to negative 1. Okay? 0 plus 1 would be 1, 0 minus 1 would be negative 1. Then I need to divide by the factor of 3. Negative 1 divided by 3. You can write negative 0.3 repeating, or you can leave that on the screen. Click the second key, then PRB, then equals, and it just gives you a fraction as your answer, and that's okay. I'll be putting fractions on that case. Okay, 30x to the second power equals negative 15x, so you have two answers, okay? You also have x to the second and the variables to the second, and it's to the first. So, you need to make sure this side is 0, okay? It's not, so then you're going to take the negative 15 to 0 by adding 15x with the x. Okay, but you don't have x on the other side. You have x to the second, but that's not the same as x. So you hang out that plus 15x up there. You hang it out. Then you put equals 0, and you do slots. You have x to the second, 30 is x to the second, 15 is x. There is no constant, so it's x second and x. Okay. So 30 is my x to the second, and 15 is my x. Okay, now factor that side. It's two terms, the x to the second with its 30 and the x with its 15, so two terms. So GCF. With two terms, there's a second box we're going to add down here, but not today. It's not going to be applied today. Okay, check the final term for a letter, and it's there. Check the first term for a negative. It's not there. 30 and 15. So you go into 15's row, there's 30 with it, so 15 would be our GCF. So you put that in parentheses, and then you divide by 15x. So 30 divided by 15, that's 2. Now to divide the letters, you put XX for x, that stands for x to the second, then divided by x, and you put that x alongside that 2. Then 15 divided by 15 is 1. It is not 0. Something divided by itself is always 1. Then divide the x by the x, those will just cancel. Okay, so we have 15x, and then we have 2x plus 1. And then we have f1 and f2. So 15x could equal 0, or 2x plus 1 equals 0. It's like you're taking this and breaking it into two parts, two easier parts. A complicated thing breaking it up into two simpler parts. So divide by 15, and that's 0. Over here you got times 2 and plus 1, so minus 1, 0 minus a number ends up being the negative of that number. Then you divide each side by your 2. Negative 1 divided by 2, you can write negative 0.5, or you can go second PRB equals, and it just be negative 1/2, but I'm fine if you write the decimal. It's fine with me. Okay, 6x to the second power minus 15x equals 0. So again, you have x to the second. There are two answers, okay, because it's the variable we're finding is to the second. There's two possible answers. So that variable's to the second, and that variable's also to the first. So you have to use your factoring properties, okay? So you're already set. You're set. You don't need to move anything. You're already at 0. So you go under, slot the terms, okay? You're already set, and then you go straight to your box. So you don't have to get anything out of there. GCF. So you're over here. Make a wall on that side. So you're looking at these two terms. It's these two terms right here. It's two terms. It's known as a binomial. Check the final term for a variable, and you have it. There's x there. You check the first term for a negative. It's not there. Now you look up 6 and 15. So here's 6. There's no 15. So I go up. Here's 6. Here's 15. That would be in row 3. So you wrap it up and you go up and divide both of these by two terms by this 3x. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. X second divided by x. X. And then this is a negative 15 divided by 3. Okay. If you get a negative, do not put plus negative. Just put minus 5. If you get a negative in the second one, you write minus and then this number, no negative. And then x divided by x, those cancel. So we have 3x, and then we have 2x minus 5. So f1, f2. So 3x equals 0, 2x minus 5 equals 0. So here you're going to divide both of these by 3, and that gives me 0. Here you got times 2 and minus 5, so you get rid of the minus 5 with a plus 5. That's going to be 5. Then you divide by 2. 5 divided by 2 is a decimal. You can put the decimal 2.5, or you can go second PRB 2.5. It's up to you on the decimal or fraction. Okay, next problem. X to the second minus 10x equals 0. So there are two answers. Okay. You have x to the second along with x to the first, regular x. So you need to factor. So when you're using factoring, you got to make sure you have a 0 on one side, and if you do, you write the word set. Then you put a 1 in front of that, so you have a coefficient. If you don't have one, it's a 1. Then you go straight, just make the slots under the numbers. Okay, you don't need to rearrange anything. So It's two terms. It's a binomial. Bi means two. So you check your last term for an x, and it's there. You check the first term in negative. There's no negative in front. It's not there. 1 and 10. So here's 1, here's 10. So they're both in the 1 row. Okay? So 1x. So I'm going up here and dividing by 1x. So 1 divided by 1 is 1. Then I take the x to the second divided by the x. So that's how that works. These cancel. You still have an x left. You put that alongside here. Then you take your negative 10 divided by your 1. Negative 10 divided by 1 is negative 10. If you get a negative, you just simply put minus the number 10. Negative means that will be a minus instead of a plus. Then x divided by x. Those cancel, so we do not put an x alongside the 10. Okay, so you have 1x, and then 1x minus 10. So you have f1, f2. So 1x could equal 0, or 1x minus 10 could equal 0. So here we got times 1, so we divide each side by 1, and 0 divided by 1 is 0. Over here, you got times 1 minus 10, so you need to get rid of your minus 10 by plus 10, okay? So 1 times x equals 10, and then you can divide by 1, but 10 divided by 1 is still 10. Okay, 0 and 10. Okay, next problem. Negative 10x to the second power plus 25x equals 0. So you have two answers to this because you have x to the second. That's why there are two answers. That's why. Now, unfortunately, you've also got this x that doesn't have a second power, so those cannot be combined. You have to use your factor properties. So you circle your equals, and if you got the 0 there, you write set, and then you just draw in the slots from the problem. You don't need to make your own, okay? So that's 1, 2. It's two terms. It's a binomial. So it's going to be GCF, and then that's going to get us to what we need to know to solve it. You're breaking this complicated expression into two simpler expressions. Check the final term for a variable, a letter. It's there. Remember, wall that side. Okay? Because when I'm asking you the final term, you're looking on this side. You separate it with a wall, and there's an x there. Check the first term for a negative, and it's there. You put that in front of the slot. Now to find the number that goes, you look up 10 and 25. So 10, is 25 a multiple of 10? No, it's not. So go find 10 again. It's fifth row. 25 is a multiple of 5, so 10 and 25 would be 5. So then you need to go up and divide by this negative 5x. Okay, so negative 10 divided by negative 5 is positive 2. Now to divide the letters, x second means two x's, and then x without a power is a single x. And you put x alongside the 2. 25 divided by negative 5, okay, that's going to be a negative. So if it's a negative, you just write minus the number 5. Okay, that's how to express a negative 5. Then x divided by x. Okay, those cancel, and now we're factored. So negative 5x in the first parentheses, then 2x minus 5 in the second. So f1, f2, you set them each equal to 0. So negative 5x equals 0, 2x minus 5 equals 0. So know your operations. You got a times negative 5, so you would divide by negative 5 there. 0 divided by negative 5 is 0. 0 divided by anything, 0. Then times 2 and minus 5. Plus 5. Plus 5, and you get rid of your times 2 by dividing by 2. Okay, 5 divided by 2 is a decimal, so you can put 2.5 or second PRB, that would be 2 1/2. Okay, last example. Negative 12x to the second equals negative 30x. So there are two answers for x. You have the x to the second, and you also in the equation you have this x that isn't to the second, so we cannot combine those, okay? You can combine an x to an x. Heck, you can combine x second, but you can't combine an x second with an x. Okay, but you're not set, so you need to get this to 0, and you would plus 30x. But remember, it's 30x, so it can't go with that number x to the second. It's x, so there's no x without a second power, so I hang it up here. Okay. So now you slot it yourself. You put the equals 0. Then you go slot x second, because you're going to have the negative 12. And then slot x, you're going to have the 30. No constant slot, because you don't have those. 0 doesn't count. That's on the other side. Never slot a 0. Don't ever do that. So negative 12 is your x second, and then 30 is your x. So now you're over here, and you see the two terms you have to factor with 0 on the other side, exactly what you want. So you make your GCF. So you're over here, the last term does have that variable. There's a negative in front, so you put a negative, and then 12 and 30. You got to follow the steps. So 12, no 30. Here's 12 again, and 6 is row, and 30 is in that row too, so 6 is my GCF. So negative 6x is what we're coming up here and dividing by. So a negative 12 divided by a negative 6 is a positive 2. Now I got to divide the x's. X second divided by x. So that would be an x right alongside the 2. Then I take a 30 divided by a negative 6. That's a negative 5. So since I got a negative 5, I put a minus 5. Okay. Okay, so negative 6x, 2x minus 5 equals 0. Okay. So this is your first factor, this is your second. You have made it into two simpler expressions. That's what factoring is. Negative 6x equals 0, 2x minus 5 could equal 0. So times circle, you divide by negative 6 on both sides here. So 0 divided by negative 6 is 0. Then over here you got plus 5, plus 5. Then divide by 2, divide by 2. Then 5 divided by 2, you can write 2.5 or you can click second PRB equals, that would be 2 1/2. Okay. All right.